Hi, welcome back or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Laura. Hi, hello, welcome. I have a sweet little kitten on my lap today because he is feeling very needy right all this week. He's been very needy, which is fine. This is my March update for my No Pan Left Behind challenge project that I'm doing over here on my YouTube in my personal life and my day-to-day for 2023. I am really feeling, or I was feeling really disconnected from my makeup collection, especially like my eyeshadows. I was someone that was really hyper focused on my eyeshadow panning project. So my Pan That palette that I was doing, my Pan Those eyeshadows, deck of panning, Project Level Up. I think I did a Fantasy Self showdown thing with Haley. Like, there was a lot of projects going on in my life a year, 2 years, etc. ago. And this year, I've just kind of taken a step back, realized that I really want to investigate and like figure out what. All right, bye, bud. Really investigate and figure out what items, what palettes, what shades, what eyeshadows in my collection I'm really drawn to versus what ones I'm really not super drawn to. And I think doing something where it's more visual like this is going to help my brain put two and two together and figure out, like, can I declutter things? Have I not used things all year? Like, what do I really like? What am I just not reaching for? I've also been feeling like I've been really successful by giving myself little mini goals within this video so I can still like keep myself on track, even though these updates aren't really like a full project update. It's really just to check in, like, how am I doing? How are things? Where am I at? Like, that kind of thing. This is like no pressure. Taking this more lax approach to like using my collection. What a novel idea of just using your stuff. But I've been really successful with this. As I've done in my previous updates, I do want to just recap the past couple months, how things were, that kind of thing. So I'm going to scooch over here. I'll have some information go on the side in case you're like a visual person and you like to see the numbers rather than hear the numbers. In January, I had 629 total pans of eyeshadow that I could have touched, whether that's palettes, whether that's singles, anything like that. I had 629 different pans that I could put my little grubby paws, my little brushes in. I ended up using 158 shades in the month of January. That is 25% of my collection, which it feels huge. That feels incredible for me. But I did end up completing my No Pan Left Behind challenge on 6 different palettes in the month of January. I did end up touching every single shade in my Natasha Denona Green Brown palette. I touched every shade in my Morphe and Sour Patch Kids collab. That is the Sour Then Sweet palette. I had that in my Pan Those eyeshadows earlier this year. I touched every shade in my Druid palette, mostly because I did a 3 looks 1 palette, neither here nor there. I also touched every shade in a brand new palette in January. I had the Too Faced Pinker Times Ahead palette. I purchased that in January, and then I used every shade in January. I touched every shade in my Sci-Fi Green by Kaleidos, that's a 6-pan palette, and then the Sashimi City palette, again, by Kaleidos, a nice 6-pan palette. So that was a lot of usage all immediately in the month of January, which was really exciting. Then we look at the month of February, where I actually ended up decluttering a couple shades out of my collection. There were 2 shades from Juvia's Place that just irritated my eyes, so I decluttered those out of my collection. And then I was sent PR from Fantasy Cosmetica, and I know I mentioned it in my last video for my No Pan Left Behind, but I am an affiliate for Fantasy Cosmetica now, so you could shop using my code LauraForce for 10% off. Link will be up there, down there. It is an affiliate link, so if you click it, I will get like some money compensated. Anyway, but in the month of February, I decluttered 2 shades. I got 9 shades from that palette in PR. And so throughout the month of February, I had a total of 636 pans of eyeshadow that I could have dabbled in. And I ended up touching 133 different shades in the month of February. That is 22% of my collection touched in the month of February. If we are combining both January and February, I touched a total of 248 different pans of eyeshadow, which is 39% of my collection. I touched the Natasha Denona Safari palette, my Sugar Drizzle Mountain and Stars palette, my ColourPop Pretty Guardian palette, and the Fantasy Cosmetica Rogue palette. Again, I did a 3 looks 1 palette with that as well, so that's why I touched every shade in there. I've been really making a lot of strides trying to touch everything that I possibly can. But March, I took a little bit different approach, and instead of wanting to touch palettes as a whole, I really wanted to reach for certain singles in my collection. And if you guys don't remember, I'll just put a little blurb from last month. I ended up picking out every single green eyeshadow in my storage palette, in depotable magnetic palettes, that kind of thing. And I've already started to filter things back in, like the shade here and the shade up here. So I have been using my green shadows in this format for the past couple days in March. So it's been giving me a lot of opportunity to kind of play around and use different combinations of shadows, layer different things, like an interesting way that I want to layer them, that kind of thing. I don't think I touched technically every single green eyeshadow in my collection. I'm looking at my list again. I know there's a green in my VR Neon palette that I didn't touch. There is, I think, and then there were some shades in my Ice Cream Dream palette. Long story short, I didn't touch every single one of my green eyeshadows, but I touched probably 95% of my green eyeshadows in my collection, which I'm just gonna, thank you. Thanks, me. I had still, throughout the month of March, I still had 636 total pans of eyeshadow to touch. I ended up touching independently 129 different pans of green, or different pans of eyeshadow. All in all, throughout all the first quarter of the year so far, so January, February, and March, I have touched 328 different shades of eyeshadow in my collection. That is over 50% of my collection has now been touched. That was 51.5% of my collection. It feels incredible to have that much touched in my collection. I'm so happy about that. I don't think that I would have done this same work effort that I'm doing this year. If I was doing this last year, I don't think I would have done the same. I think I was stretched too thin, and there was just too much going on where I couldn't feel successful in touching so many things. So taking this step back and kind of reaching from, like I keep calling it, the study in my palettes, trying to figure out my palette collection and figure out which ones spark joy and which ones don't anymore, trying to use them, and maybe if they don't work in a couple looks, like being able to part with them and understanding what things I do and don't like. It's been really eye-opening for me. I did do a haul from Pretties for Your Face. I ended up I purchased 11 shadows, and then I bought a mystery box. So all in all, I had 16 eyeshadows that ended up coming into my collection through the month. I purchased it in March. I technically received them in April. I definitely need to take a step back in the eyeshadow consumption. I don't know if I'm going to touch everything this year yet. I'm still, like, it still could or couldn't happen. Like this, it's not set in stone. Nothing is guaranteed that I'm going to touch everything. Like, what if I just decide, like, for instance, I've been looking down like this whole video. I'm so sorry. But I'm looking at my list, and I know the VR Neon palette I haven't used in months. Like, on top of this year, I know months and months previously, I haven't even reached for that one. My Bare Necessities palette, I've reached for 3 shades out of this year so far. And like, that's a palette that I feel like I could definitely use more of, but I don't feel that strongly for. Same thing with my Profusion Chocolates palette. Like, there's some palettes in here that I'm like, do I really want that still? And then other palettes where I'm like, I love that, but I don't know what, when, where, what to use that shadow, the palette for. I don't know. So for the month of March, I didn't complete No Pan Left Behind in a ton of palettes, in all honesty. I only did it for 2 eyeshadow palettes, but I am feeling proud of myself still because I did also reach for 2 complete rows of my single shadows. I have my single storage palette here with the shades that I'm currently panning in projects taken out already, but I ended up using completely rows 4 and 5. Oh man, I've shuffled this around slightly. So 1, 2, 3. Row 4 is this guy here with these more like olivey warm toned greens. row 5 is going to be this one with the more cool toned greens. And then I did end up using all of the greens up until this shade here. This is what I count as like still green shadows. So I've used 2.5 rows completely, but really all of the green shades that I had in here at one point. These on this corner or this edge are all new shades from Prettier For Your Face, so I'm not really counting that in this quite yet. But I definitely want to rearrange this, but I don't want to ruin my numbers for my No Pan Left Behind. That is everything in my storage palette. Then on top of the singles, I also reached for 2 palettes completely. I touched every shade in these 2 palettes. The first one is this guy here. This is my Sugar Drizzle. This is the longest title of a palette. The Sugar Drizzle makes some annoyingly large palette names. This is the Paint Me Green and Call Me a Pickle because I'm done Dylan with you, or the pickle palette as I call it. And I did reach for every single one of these shades at least once. I'm pretty sure I reached for this shade Dill Pickles a couple times. Same thing with that middle shade Pickle Juice, which is just a purple with like green reflex in it. It's really, really cool. Really liked, again, that to like grunge out the lower lash line kind of thing. So used all 6 shades in here. I also ended up reaching for every shade in my YSL Color Clutch. This is the Marrakech Color Clutch. This is a palette that Josh gave me in 2021. He gifted this to me in April, which was so sweet of him. This is such a freaking expensive palette for what it is. This is a 10-pan palette, but this was $129. There was one palette that I ended up finishing my No Pan Left Behind challenge within 2 months. So this palette was used in February, and I used the remaining shades in the month of March. And that is my BH Cosmetics Avocado Toast palette. I ended up reaching for almost every single shade in this palette in February. I only needed to use these 3 pinks and then the shade Haas, and I did that this month, or I guess in March. So this palette is technically completed for my No Pan Left Behind also. So I put very minimal effort into thinking about what shades, what palettes, what I'm thinking about for the month of April. So if you have any shade suggestions, my mind is leaning towards purples and blues. So like periwinkles, anything that revolves around blue and purple, because I think that is like April showers in my head. That makes sense. So I kind of based my picks loosely based on that mindset. So the first thing that makes me think of April is this guy here. This is the Glam Light Ice Cream Dream palette. There are pastels, neon pastels, brights. Like this palette really does scream April, May, like spring, summer to me. So I would like to get a good chunk of usage on this within the month of April. In addition, I have this guy to kind of accompany the Glam Light Ice Cream Dream and to accompany some other ones in this that we'll talk about. This is the Sugarpill Fun Size. This is the original Fun Size palette from Sugarpill. I bought this in 2020, 2019, something like that. I remember I was going to go on a trip. The trip got canceled. I was sad. I bought this. So I am using this in my look today too, this shade up here. Then what I think that palette's going to pair really well with, and this palette desperately needs mattes, this guy here. This is the Sugar Dreams palette by Sugar Drizzle. This is a duo and multi-chrome dream of a palette. I have only reached into these 2 shades in this palette so far, one for the month of March. One, I was really just craving something different from all of the greens, so I did a really beautiful look using this. If I have a picture of that too, I'll post it. This shade Shooting Star really just acts more like a lid topper, so you really see more of that incredible blue shift that this thing has. I am so excited to dip more into this palette and dip more into these shades. I'm really excited. I think these are going to pair really, really nicely together. Another one that's going to pair really well with that mattes in the Fun Size palette is my Adept Cosmetics Plain Jane Remastered palette. This is just a palette that's really full of like iridescent duo multi-chromes. We have a pan over here on this shade that is ACI 5. There's a lot going on in this palette. This palette is so beautiful. This has more of that like squishy, soft, almost putty-like formula for shimmers, which I really like anymore, but they work best with a glitter glue in my opinion. But the last palette that we have to talk about is the Kaleidos Futurism, what are you? 6, the Lunar Lavender palette. This again is just another palette that screams springtime because of these two topper kind of shades, these purples, and then these two mattes really ground the look. So this is going to be, well, obviously it looks great with my background too, but I'm excited to get use out of this one. Also, again, another one that has a lot more mattes than shimmers that can be used with all of the other mattes and shimmers that I have. Hoping to reach for my Clionadh singles as well as a lot of these pretty for your face singles. I'm hoping to touch a lot of these 2 rows. These last 2 rows are all the pretty for your face. I'm hoping to touch a lot of those too, just because they are brand new to my collection and I would like to get 17 shades already like knocked off my list, you know? But that is it for my No Pan Left Behind challenge that I am doing. I know there are a lot of other content creators that are doing this. I know Sophie Alexandra is doing this challenge on hers, as well as she's doing like a single eyeshadow. It's called an Imageddon. Her project for her singles too, so she's almost doing like 2 different No Pan Left Behinds. And then I know Steph from It's Just Steph is also doing a No Pan Left Behind for her palettes, as well as like a single shadow No Pan Left Behind, where I've just kind of combine the 2 into one video. But I definitely think you should check those 2 wonderful individuals out. I will have some more individuals that are doing No Pan Left Behind. I know Little Miss Lipstick also does this, and I think she was my inspiration between her and Joanna Pans on Instagram. They really inspired me to do this project for myself and track it in this format, because I'm just more of a video kind of gal than picture kind of gal. But before my camera battery dies, I'm just going to wish you guys a wonderful day. I hope you guys are staying healthy, sane, and safe. And I will catch you in my next video. Bye!